Space, the final frontier. For centuries, men and women have looked at the starry sky and, marveling at the beauty and infinity of heaven, said, "What is that place? I want to go there." Today, we are telling the story of how humanity achieved the dream of exploring the sky and setting foot onto the moon. And we'll see how that great achievement, like many others in the 20th century, had its roots in the fact that two countries hated each other and wanted to tear each other to bits. In particular, we'll look at the following point: the Cold War, and we'll do a small retrieval of what was the Cold War, the space race, the man on the moon, and then I will give you a model answer on how to answer today's question, which is explain why the space race happened. Why did humans land on the moon? So, the Cold War. You might remember from our last lesson that between 1945 and 1991, the entire world was going through the so-called Cold War, a long period of tensions between the United States of America, or USA, who were capitalist, and the Soviet Union, or USSR, who were communist. The Cold War remained cold, meaning that the USA and the USSR never went to war with each other directly, but instead tried to make other countries fight each other for them instead. They did this, as we said yesterday, in the Cuban Missile Crisis, and so on. This was because both powers were, and still are, armed with thousands of nuclear missiles, which could destroy life on Earth if they were fired. No one wanted that, and neither the Americans nor the Russians. They knew that if one of them launched the missiles on the other, then the other was still in time to detect the launch and strike back with its own missiles, resulting in what we called mutually assured destruction, or, with a very fitting acronym, MAD, M-A-D. This knowledge of the mutually assured destruction, however, did not prevent them from trying to find more ways to threaten their opponent and show superiority. One of such ways was being the first superpower to put an object in space, not just in the sky, but beyond the atmosphere. If either America or the Soviets were able to put objects in space, it meant that they could attack the enemy from the sky at any moment, or invent who knows what way to threaten them. Okay, so how and why did the space race begin? This was the beginning, as we said, of the so-called space race, a competition between two superpowers to see which one was able to reach space first, and once in space, do the most impressive things. In the first phase of the space race, it was the Soviets who had the upper hand. Okay, in 1957, remember it because it's an important date, 1957, they achieved two historical milestones. They launched the first artificial satellite into orbit and then sent the first living creature in space. Start from the beginning. The first artificial satellite was called Sputnik, and does not look very impressive, to be honest. You'll see a picture in the transcript. It's little more than a metal ball with 4 antennas and little else. However, it was incredibly important for the development of science and new technology and for the beginning of the space race. Why? Because the Americans were now very afraid of the Soviets and of what they could do. If they could send a satellite into space, could they also not send rockets armed with nuclear bombs from Russia directly to the United States? Maybe they could. America could not just wait and see, they had to react. And they did, eventually creating NASA, which stands for the National Aeronautics and Space Agency, which is the national American agency for launching things into space, essentially. Then, later in 1957, the Soviets did something else that stunned the world. Before they could launch a human into space, they needed to know how dangerous it was and how to best protect and shield a living being from whatever dangers could hide in the blackness of space. So what did they do? They sent the first living thing, a cute stray dog named Laika, there is a picture also in the transcript, to space. Laika unfortunately died while in space, sorry, let me amend that. Laika, as we said, unfortunately died while in space, but her sacrifice was not vain. Experimenting on animals in space allowed scientists to improve their projects, and eventually it allowed them to send the first humans in space. And here we have yet another incredible Soviet victory in the space race within the course of just a few years. In 1961, again, other hugely important date, 1961, they were able to send the first human in space, a cosmonaut named Yuri Gagarin. Picture in the transcript as well. Cosmonaut is the Russian word for astronauts. They are essentially the same. Now, sending a human into space was an immense, incredible, and unprecedented achievement for a human being. Think about that. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans believed that they were forced on this planet, okay, that we could not leave. We cannot fly, we are awful swimmers, we're stuck in here. In 1961, the collective efforts of hundreds of scientists and engineers had revealed us that this planet was no longer a prison, that we had the means within our brain to create things that could explore the skies, that could explore space. The Soviets were winning with these huge milestones, the first satellite, the first animal into space, the first human, and they were winning hard. If the Americans wanted to recover, they had to do something quite spectacular. Now, it took them 8 years, but eventually, on the 20th of July 1961, after 10 years of studying and experimenting, the Americans were able to do that. They launched a spaceship called the Apollo 11, which landed on the moon and was able to come back to Earth with everyone alive on board. Small parenthesis here. The spaceship was the Apollo 11. A part of the spaceship that was detached and landed on the moon was the Eagle module. Still, you need to remember 1969 and Apollo 11. Now, as Neil Armstrong, the first man to set foot on the moon, said as he came out of the module, it was one small step for a man, but a giant leap for mankind. Whatever the reasons for the space race, the Cold War, the hostility between the Americans and the Soviets, these amazing, awe-inspiring and almost unbelievable achievement of the human spirit made it look absolutely insignificant. Not only we could soar into space thanks to the work of our scientists and engineers, now we know for sure that we could, if we wanted to, land on the surface of another celestial body. It was indeed a giant leap for mankind. Now, those were the facts. I am looking forward to read your answers and let me know if you have any doubt. See you next time.